what's up? It's Olivia. Welcome back to my channel, Olivia Simone PhD, where I like to share my experience in academia as a new faculty member. A lot of my channel shares my time from my master's and PhD programs at Penn State, where I studied media studies and mass communications, and now I just completed my first year as a tenure-track assistant professor at Minot State University. I was thinking about video ideas, and one that I think will be so helpful is 5 things that I did in graduate school that actually prepared me to be a faculty member. Now, not to say that not every aspect of graduate school is important, but these are the specific things that I am implementing into my day-to-day life as faculty. So hopefully this is helpful if you are currently a graduate student. If you haven't done these things, you can make sure to do them, because I can almost guarantee you're gonna wish you had done it. The very first thing that I'm so glad I went through as a graduate student, because it prepared me for being a faculty member, was the travel reimbursement process. If your paper gets accepted to a conference and you go and travel for it, typically you will have funds that will reimburse you for doing that. Now, if you've been through this process before, then you know it's not as simple as you book everything, you come back, you say, okay, I spent $1,200, can I have my money, please? There's this whole process and protocols and mountains of paperwork that you're gonna have to submit. Now, if you go through this process at your graduate institution, it's probably gonna be similar to how it is as a faculty member. So for example, I knew from my time as a PhD student that if I was booking flights, I not only needed to provide my receipts from the flight, but I needed to have a cost comparison of other airlines on the same day and time, and then that same airline and different airlines for different days and different times for traveling. Essentially, during this travel reimbursement process, you have to justify why you made the decision you made. Why did you book that flight instead of the flight that was a red-eye, or the flight on Delta, or the flight on United? Why did you stay at this hotel versus this other hotel? Did the conference provide lunch and breakfast? Well, then we're not reimbursing you for lunch and breakfast. Why did you take a Lyft? Was a shuttle available from the hotel to the airport? So going through that process as a graduate student, knowing that I needed to screenshot my boarding passes, knowing that I needed to make sure to take a picture of the program that said, here's her name, here's the date, here's her presentation time, she's actually presenting, right? Knowing all of that made the process here so much easier. I'll also say a huge one too was even knowing that procedures and protocols existed for travel reimbursement. So when I came to Minot State, when I knew, okay, I'm pretty sure I'm going to this conference in March, I was able to look up on the website, Minot State employee, travel forms. There's all these procedures and protocols, so even knowing that exists in the first place to look up, that is huge. The second thing that has been really helpful now as a faculty member is having already been through processes like getting IRB approval and doing interlibrary loan. I started as a master's student at Penn State. I definitely knew what IRB was, but I had never done a study myself or really helped with the planning parts of a study. And so I'm really grateful that I joined this project with a more senior PhD, senior PhD student, and then me and another girl who had just graduated, ? So we were working on this project, and the PhD student was like, hey, let's sit down together and fill out this IRB paperwork. That was my first introduction. So again, I knew, oh, there's a website for IRB. Oh, there's a list that tells you all of the paperwork you need to fill out. And then within the paperwork, sometimes there's certain language that you need to use. So that girl walked us through, explained why she was answering the things that she did. Then when we got feedback, she explained how she was, formatting her answers to address their concerns. And that process, again, then made it so that for my master's thesis, when my advisor was like, okay, do the IRB paperwork, I knew what to expect, I knew how to do it. So if you are a graduate student and you have not gone through this IRB process yet, what I recommend is on a project asking if the person doing IRB will sit down with you and walk you through that process. And then next time, volunteer to do the IRB paperwork yourself. Again, this made it so now at Minot State, I knew to search Minot State IRB, I knew what kind of documents to expect, and then I had an idea of how IRB likes the language. Of course, every institution is going to be slightly different, but having gone through that process already made it so I didn't have to ask anyone when I was here, hey, what's IRB like? How do I do it? Right? I already knew what to do, was able to take initiative and do it by myself. Same thing with interlibrary loan. If you're getting your PhD somewhere, then probably your institution does have a lot of resources for research, so you're probably able to get access to most articles that you want. But if you move institutions, especially if it's one that's not an R1 or an R2, you might find that your school doesn't have access to any of the articles you want to read. And so yeah, I go through the interlibrary loan process quite a bit here. Thankfully, I'm already familiar with it from being at Penn State. I can't think of any more examples like IRB or interlibrary loan, but little things like that, do it now while you're a grad student, just so it's one less thing you have to really learn while you're a faculty member. Third thing I'm so glad I did as a graduate student before being a faculty member was teaching classes. I don't care if you plan to go to an R1, you're gonna do a 2-2. Even so, I so highly recommend teaching classes before you get to your first faculty job. There's so many reasons why. At Penn State, I was able to teach a variety of classes, both in person and online, where I modified content from the previous instructor, other classes where I got to completely create the syllabus, the readings, the class policies, etc. My very first assistantship, I was teaching research methods for advertising and public relations, and this is where I was modifying content from another instructor. The grad students we don't have access to the textbook, and the textbook is optional. So I was spending so much time trying to interpret these PowerPoints that I was given. When I say so much time, I mean over 20 hours a week, which was the maximum I was supposed to be spending on an assistantship. Got to the point where I had contacted one of my committee members who was a faculty member who also taught this class. I sat down and talked with her. And she was like, Olivia, you're a student. You need to be spending most of your time prepping for your own classes, not classes you're teaching. It doesn't need to be complicated. Slides don't need to be perfect. You need to cut down your time. So from that experience, I learned, one, it's more difficult for me to modify someone's content than to create my own content, but also slides and stuff, they don't need to be perfect. They just need to be good enough. Because for example, now I am on a 4-4 load and my breakdown is 80-10-10. So 80% of my time I'm supposed to spend on my classes and advising students. So let's say your work week is 40 hours. Okay. So 80% of that is 32. So 32 hours a week to my 4 classes. Well, 12 hours of those week I'm in class itself. So then I have 20 hours to read the textbook, prep the lectures, prep the homework, grade exams for 4 classes. 20 hours a week. That's how much time I was spending on that one course the very first semester that I was teaching. So again, I'm so glad to have learned that lesson then and not my first semester teaching 4 classes trying to spend 20 hours a week per class. Having the opportunity to teach so many classes has also really helped me refine my classroom policies. The fourth thing that I did as a graduate student that I'm so glad now as a faculty member is during my last year, I joined a lab group that also allows alumni to stay in the lab group. I am in the Page Center lab group at Penn State, which has current Penn State grad students, current Penn State faculty, and then Penn State alum. I joined the lab group kind of randomly last year because my friend was like, oh, you should come to the meeting. And I was like, awesome, I'm not busy, I'll come to the meeting. It was my second year in the lab group and I actually had the opportunity to lead the lab group project, which was such a great experience to have at this stage. But it also means that from here on out, I know that I'm gonna have essentially 1 paper per year from this lab group that's fully funded by the lab group. And yes, where I am in authorship is going to change and that's totally fine. But at least I know, okay, there's always that one project that I will be able to have each year. Especially when you're on the tenure track, I mean, it depends on what school you're at. At other schools that I had interviewed at, I know it was 1 publication per year. At R1s, my friends have told me it's more you're expected to have 2.5 publications each year, right? So 2 to 3. And so especially if you're on one of those tracks where you're expected to have more, having at least, okay, I know there's going to be at least 1 project consistent through this lab group, again, that's going to be funded. That's a huge thing I've learned as a faculty member. Trying to get funding for projects is can be difficult. The last experience I'm so glad that I had in graduate school is I had an assistantship that really taught me the backstage of the research process. So for some of you, this might look like a research assistantship. For me, I was actually editorial liaison for a peer-reviewed academic journal, and that's where I learned so much information. So essentially for that, one of my professors was the editor of this journal. I was the editorial liaison. One grad student was each semester. Read every single piece that was submitted to the journal. I would then give an assessment of it. Did I think it was rigorous? Did I think it was relevant to our journal? The editor would then give his feedback, which that's really great to like provide your feedback on something and then see your professor's feedback, whether like they agree with you or like, no, that thing you pointed out actually isn't all that important, or yes, that is very important. But through this, I learned that like, oh, it goes to the editor, then to an associate editor, then they assign reviewers. Then it can take, 1 to 2 months for reviewers to get back to the person. This is also where I saw an author response letter for the first time. So if you submit an article to a journal and you get a revise and resubmit, that means you need to address whatever comments the reviewers gave you. I didn't really know that when that happens, you have to write a letter to them saying like how you addressed every single point that they made. So that again was a really good experience for me to understand the ins and outs of publishing. Now you can probably get very similar experience if you're a research assistant, especially if you're a research assistant and you're going through this process of not only doing a study, but through that publication process, right? So submitting it with a cover letter, getting that revise and resubmit, doing the revision, writing that author, feedback form, etc. You'll have plenty of experience actually like formulating studies, conducting studies, probably doing data analysis for it, but then like that next step, that is what is so important, and I'm glad I had experience with that before then I was a faculty member trying to do it by myself. So those are the 5 things or experiences that I had in graduate school that I'm so glad I had that have come in so handy as a faculty member. Now, of course, I'm sure there's so many experiences in graduate school that are important, and there's a lot of, classes and things I learned that were really important, but these were like the extra things outside of class that I feel really actually prepared me to have a job in this area. Alrighty, if you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. If I left anything out, please comment it down below. Also, let me know what the weather is like where you are at. At the time I'm filming this, I'm in North Dakota and it's windy and like, I think it'll be in the 70s today, but it's been so cold. By the time this comes out, I will be in California, so it's probably 90 degrees and hot, so yay. What is the weather where you are at? Let me know. Make sure to also subscribe to see more content. Let me know if there's any questions or types of videos you want to see down in the comments, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!